As Bradley states in his classic work, a Shakespearean tragedy results in exceptional suffering and calamity for the play's hero. Such suffering contrasts sharply with the hero's previous fortunes, and is all the more compelling because previously the hero was held in such high esteem, enjoyed such respect and renown within his own society and land. King Lear is a perfect example of this. We watch, utterly gripped, as the old king foolishly abdicates from his throne, still expecting to retain the name and all the addition to a king, without the power to enforce it. He cuts off his youngest, most loving daughter when she refuses to indulge him in flattery, and pays a terrible price for this when his other two daughters rapidly tire of his whims and unfaltering belief in his own omnipotence. Lear ends up ranting and raving out on a heath during a terrible storm, and his inability to accept his plight or adjust to his altered circumstances leads to temporary flashes of insanity. His youngest daughter fails in a bid to restore him to previous dignity and health, and Lear dies of a broken heart when he finds her hanged.
In Timon of Athens, our tragic hero is an obscenely generous, kind-hearted host with a propensity to dishing out extravagant gifts and hosting enormous banquets. However, unknown to him, he has fallen into a colossal amount of debt and is left totally disillusioned by the world when his so-called friends refuse to offer him financial aid. After hosting a mock dinner party, in which he serves up cauldrons of warm water, he retreats to some woods outside Athens, where he cankers, develops a frighteningly absolute hatred towards every aspect of mankind, and eventually dies of a diseased mind.
Two stories about formerly great men ruined by their own mistakes and the behaviour of those closest to them. But let's explore, compare and contrast what causes their respective downfalls in more detail. Stay tuned. Filmed live from the glorious island of Alderney in the Channel Islands. This is Schofield on Shakespeare.
It is very rare that a single mistake or factor can result in a transformation of a life from great power, strength and prosperity to poverty, humiliation and destitution, and this is very much the case in both plays. However, it is clear that catastrophic misjudgments made by both Lear and Timon contribute significantly to their respective downfalls and show that they have failed to acquire genuine insight into those closest to them. In Act 1, Scene 1 of King Lear, our hero attempts to stage an egotistical love-in towards himself, before dividing his kingdom amongst his three daughters. However, he misjudges horribly their different responses. Goneril, his eldest daughter, indulges her father's appetite for relentless praise and flattery, and Julie coos,
"Sir, I love you more than word can wield the matter. Dearer than eyesight, space and liberty."
Closer analysis of these lines, let alone an understanding of her character provided by her words and actions later in the play, must surely suggest that she is talking nonsense. Is it really likely that she values her relationship with her father more than her ability to see, not be confined in a narrow space, and be free? She is the daughter of a king and married to a nobleman. If her words hypothetically had to be put to the test, would she really prove her love by giving up all the benefits both of her class and her own humanity? Lear's middle daughter Regan follows her sister's lead and enters into the competitive spirit by declaring,
In my true heart, I find she names the very deed of love, only she comes too short.
Perhaps Regan is claiming that she loves her father more than hearing and eyesight, or the ability to walk, as well as general mobility. Whereas the audience, Cordelia, Kent and the fool, are able to see through such extravagant claims of love. Lear placidly accepts them, and this directly results in his own downfall. Whereas the above example shows Lear's dire misjudgment in a very particular scenario, a key failing on Timon's part is to be ludicrously generous all the time towards men who will not ultimately reciprocate his generosity or friendship. In Act 1, Scene 2, Ventidius offers to repay Timon for releasing him from prison. Timon's response is,
"Oh, by no means, honest Ventidius. You mistake, my love. I gave it freely ever, and there's none can truly say he gives if he receives."
Timon's words are gracious and magnanimous, and the phrasing is quasi-religious, bringing to mind words in Acts of the Apostles from the Bible. Remember the words of the Lord Jesus, how he said, "It is more blessed to give than to receive." There is nothing wrong with attempt, self-conscious or not, to mirror Jesus' life and teachings. The problem with Timon, though, is that he cannot afford it. By turning down a simple offer to return money that is rightfully his, and taking so much pleasure from having so many like brothers commanding one another's fortunes, he is sowing the seeds for his own destruction. As well as sharing a tendency to make calamitous misjudgments, both Lear and Timon in the early stages of the plays fail to listen to truths from people who genuinely care for them and whose first object is not flattery. In Act 1, Scene 1 of King Lear, Cordelia questions her elder sister's hyperbolic declarations of love towards their father in her rhetorical question,
"Why have my sisters husbands if they say they love you all?"
The logic is unquestionable. If someone genuinely possesses an all-consuming, all-conquering, above all else love towards a parent, then surely that weakens by default the strength of feelings that that person can hold towards others who also have a claim for love. Both husbands and fathers deserve dutiful love of an equal kind. Yet Lear is unable to see past Cordelia's apparent, deliberate public humiliation of him. Her refusal to play ball in the "let's show the world and court how beloved I am" game he has engineered as a final flourishing gesture of a successful active kingship. His response to Cordelia's rational explanation of her comments, valuing duty ahead of blown out of all proportion and utterly impossible declarations of never-ending feelings, is the self-indulgent, deliberately dramatic.
"So goes thy heart with this, so young and so untender?"
These rhetorical questions show Lear commanding the stage of his court. This is not a cosy family foursome, but a stage packed with attendants, 2 dukes, 2 earls, and the son of an earl. He is not prepared to entertain notions of compromise, perceived challenges to his authority, especially in front of such an audience, and his rhetorical questions pave the way towards a dramatic speech in which he not only reveals he has failed to listen to the logic dripping from Cordelia's words, but makes the disastrous misjudgment of cutting her off entirely. It is not just Cordelia in Act 1, Scene 1 that Lear fails to listen to. His devoted, loyal Earl of Kent takes up the wronged youngest daughter's case when he cries out indignantly, "What wouldst thou do, old man? Think'st thou that duty shall have dread to speak when power to flattery bows?" The address of old man may seem blunt and potentially rude, but it is a crucial reminder to the king of his humanity. He is not omnipotent. He is not on the same level of gods and planets in calling Hecate and the sun that he has repeatedly been calling on as co-allies, and so he should be more circumspect and rational in what he does. The gods may be able to get away with spur-of-the-moment, foolhardy acts of vengeance, but man most certainly cannot. Kent uses personification to emphasise exactly what Lear is doing wrong. He's been seduced by the abstract concept of flattery, and his message is clear. Goneril and Regan do not mean their extraordinary claims of love, and it is perilous to believe that they do. Kent's fate for daring to tell the truth to the blind, power-satiated old king, banished. And the consequence of Lear failing to listen to both Kent and Cordelia is that he unwittingly gives 2 daughters that do not genuinely love him ultimate power over his everyday life. two daughters that will all too rapidly combine forces to effectively send his aged body out homeless into a heath at night during a monstrous, potentially life-threatening storm. Moreover, his reaction to their honesty, banishing them both, loses him two key allies that in different circumstances might have been able to check some of Team Goneril and Regan's evil propensities. Yes, Kent does return disguised, but he does not then have the social power to challenge his fellow earls and dukes as equals. Timon of Athens, like Lear, is too smug and overconfident in his position to listen to those who dare speak the truth, even when it is uncomfortable for them to do so. Apemantus, the philosopher, repeatedly barbs at Timon about his excessive generosity towards those who do not merit it. In Act 1, Scene 2, he chides...
Thou givest so long, Timon. I fear me thou wilt give away thyself in paper shortly. What needs these feasts, pomps and vain glories?
Apemantus feels that Timon's handouts and presents have gone on for so long that he may have to give out IOU notes on bits of paper to satisfy his gift-giving addiction, as he will have spent all his money. Yet Timon chooses to wrongly interpret Apemantus's words as an attack on society. He responds...
Nay, an you begin to rail on society once, I'm sworn not to give regard to you. Farewell, and come with better music.
Apemantus may well enjoy attacking society. He is the J-Keys from As You Like It, equivalent in the play. But in this case, he is clearly targeting Timon himself, and as Timon's subsequent downfall shows, he is right to do so. By not listening to Apemantus, and also his despairing loyal steward, Timon continues his steeply spiralling descent into the ignominy of bankruptcy and public disgrace. So why do both Lear and Timon fail to listen? What is it about their respective personalities and situations? Well, there is no doubt that Lear has a huge ego, and that his position of king has historically led to him being obeyed all the time without question. Such a setup is bound to result in complacent, arrogant feelings about your own superiority and knowledge. If you've had no need to listen to others for your entire kingship, why should you start now? His language reveals his excessive pride. He refers to himself figuratively and ludicrously as a dragon, suggesting he is mythical rather than human, and then used the pompous, regal first-person plural to declare...
That thou hast sought to make us break our vow, which we durst never yet, and with strained pride to come between our sentence and our power, which nor is in our nature, nor our place can bear.
This speech is hugely revealing. As well as the crass formality towards a loyal aristocratic ally, Lear exposes himself as utterly inflexible and as never ever changed his mind on something of significance. Such a move would, to his mind, be demeaning to his position of king, and also run contrary to the demands of his own temperament. In other words, Lear fails to listen because he feels it would somehow be ignoble, indicate weakness, that it would shame the very office of king. In a completely different way, Timon fails to listen because he has an orgasmic addiction to giving away gifts and/or money. It is his legal high. In Act 1, Scene 2, he pants ecstatically.
Methinks I could deal kingdoms to my friends and ne'er be weary.
The contrast between the casual verb deal and the magnitude of kingdoms is enormous and highlights Timon's physical need to be generous, magnanimous, provide gifts to others that will leave him with infatuating flashes of feel-good factor, but which is unknowingly rapidly eating away at his comparatively modest fortune. Timon fails to listen because he is incapable of exercising restraint and has become hooked on his self-proclaimed role as the noblest mind that ever governed man, and he is the noblest purely for his hugely likeable extravagance and generosity. Another key factor in the respective downfalls of King Lear and Timon of Athens is that they are both surrounded by particularly ruthless people who seem uniquely interested in their own advancement above all else, including common decency. In Act 1, Scene 3 of King Lear, Goneril shows her ruthlessness and skewed loyalties by pouring out her frustrated feelings about her guest, her father, to a mere steward, and even instructing him to
Put on what weary negligence you please. You and your fellows. I'd have it come to question.
The use of an imperative to order her steward to deliberately disregard her father and ensure his fellow servants do likewise is extraordinarily disrespectful. Furthermore, she continues to confide her feelings about her dissatisfaction with the changes to her domestic setup when she philosophizes.
Now, by my life, old fools are babes again and must be used, with checks as flatteries, when they are seen abused.
Goneril's utter conviction is seen in the phrase, by my life, whilst the metaphorical link made between old age and babies is hugely hurtful and discourteous about a proud father who has placed his trust in her, especially as she is saying these words to a vastly social inferior, rather than in private, say, to her own husband. The fact that Goneril can philosophise so dispassionately to a servant about her only surviving parent reveals her ruthlessness and makes the audience fear for Lear's future fate within her household. Whereas Lear's two eldest daughters show their ruthlessness in rapidly making him feel that spending a moment longer with them is untenable. The ruthlessness of Timon's friends is shown in the range of excuses they use not to give him a penny in his time of need. In Act 3, Scene 3, Sempronius, a supposed friend, responds to a request for financial aid by first suggesting other, more appropriate donors. When informed they have all denied him, he changes tack and utters the breathtakingly hypocritical lines.
Must I be his last refuse? His friends, like physicians, thrive. Give him over. Must I take the cure upon me? Has much disgrace me in it. I'm angry at him that might have known my place.
In other words, Sempronius feels his honour has been questioned in being asked to help following previous unsuccessful requests to 3 other so-called friends. His perverted logic being that not being asked first brings his lofty status and important position in Athens into disrepute. The feigned indignation in the rhetorical question and the contrived use of the adjective angry reveal an inner determination to ruthlessly disregard any past friendship and past gifts from Timon, and he himself admits,
I was the first man that e'er received gift from him.
in order to vigorously and selfishly maintain every iota of his own comfortable wealth and position. Sempronius may have the most ludicrously imaginative excuse, but other friends, including Lucius and Lucullus, show a similar single-mindedness in ignoring the plight of one they have sponged off so willingly in the past. Catastrophic misjudgments, a failure to listen, being surrounded by particularly ruthless people are all key factors in Lear and Timon's downfall. But their terrible tempers and seeming inability to restrain feelings and emotions don't help either, though does make good theatre. In Act 1, Scene 4, Lear responds to Goneril's criticism of his fall and the behaviour of his 100 knights with a shocking and utterly disproportionate invective.
Into her womb convey sterility. Dry up in her the organs of increase, and from her delicate body never spring a babe to honour her.
In other words, because Goneril has dared to challenge his authority, the goddess of nature should ensure that she and her husband should never experience the joy and honour of giving birth, that they should remain childless for the rest of their days. These are wicked, vicious, vindictive words, which Goneril at this stage of the play cannot deserve. Her father's deeply personal reference to different parts of her body indicate a hidden misogyny, especially the phrase derogate body, implying that her female body is somehow debased and degraded by her strongly worded condemnation of his knight's behaviour. Lear's tendency to resort to similarly crazed diatribes every time unexpected, potentially disrespectful behaviour occurs makes the possibility of future rapprochement more and more unlikely, and hence hastens his downfall. Timon is similarly prone to hot-headed rants, although in his case they come following his financial collapse, whereas many of Lear's tirades come while salvation may still theoretically be possible. In Act 3, Scene 6 of Timon of Athens, Timon's speech during his extraordinary mock meal following his failure to secure any financial assistance shows how his anger has totally consumed his soul. He bellows,
Most smiling, smooth, detested parasites! courteous destroyers, affable wolves, meek bears. You fools of fortune, trencher friends, time's flies, company slaves, vapors and minute jacks. Of man and beast, the infinite malady crust you quite o'er.
Just as you wonder what benefits there can possibly be for Lear dramatically calling for his daughter to become sterile, so here, Timon's relentless parade of oxymoronic metaphors is unlikely to bring much long-term comfort, whilst at the same time it terminates any tiny, lingering potential for future help from those present. The vicious oxymorons reveal what really angers and upsets Timon, the difference between his friend's outward appearance and what he perceives as their inner hearts, based on their refusal to help him maintain his lavish lifestyle and propensity for extravagant gestures. Outwardly, they smile, are polite, pleasant-mannered, but he believes this is a mere front, that inwardly they are savage, utterly uncivilized and subhuman, as indicated in the wild beast animal imagery he uses. Timon's holding of a final subversive mock feast may be a dramatic, grandiose gesture, but it is fueled by a raging desire to vent spleen, rather than a realization that exploring every avenue could yet result in a partial restoration of past glory. Timon's hot-blooded behaviour may be unwise, but it does illustrate that he now no longer cares what others think of him, or indeed no longer has any interest or love for mankind as a whole. From the benevolent, all-giving host, he is metamorphosed into a determined misanthrope. As well as short fuses and hot tempers, Lear and Timon share similar expectations about how family and friends should behave towards them. They both expect instinctive loyalty from their daughters or friends, and are unable and inflexible enough to cope when they do not receive it. In Act 1, Scene 4 of King Lear, before he unleashes his relationship-terminating diatribes, Lear's baffled rhetorical questions to Goneril show that it has simply not occurred to him that his daughters will not cater for and support his every desire or whim. He first asks,
"Are you our daughter?"
before getting into his stride with the preposterously melodramatic,
"Does any here know me? This is not Lear. Does Lear walk thus? Speak thus? Where are his eyes? Either his notion weakness is discerning now lethargied. Ha! Waking. It is not so."
Lear's gist is clearly that Goneril is treating him completely inappropriately, and therefore she must somehow have mistaken his identity, as otherwise how could a king? And he refers to himself grandiosely in the third person to emphasise his own sense of importance, be disrespected in this way, especially by his own daughter. Because of Lear's previous privileged position and total authority, he has never experienced disloyalty and would not be able to anticipate it here. This lack of anticipation weakens him and makes him more vulnerable to extreme displays of emotion and inadequately armed against conflict. Timon also fails to anticipate the behaviour of his friends when he falls into crippling financial difficulties. Look at his breezy confidence as he reassures his steward in Act 2, Scene 2 of Timon of Athens.
Why dost thou weep? Canst thou the conscience lack to think I shall lack friends? Secure thy heart.
Conscience had a wider meaning in Shakespeare's time and extended to include the idea of conviction or confidence, and in this case has no moral undertones. Timon is not suggesting that his steward is morally remiss in worrying about how his friends may react to his plight, merely being misguided. The short sentence, "an imperative secure," shows Timon's utter confidence that his friends will provide, and that their subsequent actions will reassure a steward who clearly has an emotional attachment towards his master. In fact, Timon has such a deep-rooted belief and trust in his friends that he declares improvidently,
"And in some sort, these wants of mine are crowned, that I account them blessings. For by these shall I try my friends. You shall perceive how you mistake my fortunes. I am wealthy in my friends."
Just as Lear uses the language of finance and mathematics to go back on previous rantings about sterility, to declare Goneril is twice Regan's love because her allowance of 50 knights yet doth double 5 and 20, so here Timon mistakenly shows utter confidence in his own bonds with his friends, in his use of the dramatically ironic financial term wealthy. He believes that just as he has used his wealth generously to lay on wondrous banquets and show amity and presents, so his friends will reciprocate because of their closeness and loyalty to him. In fact, he returns to his quasi-religious language to declare that being within inches of humiliating bankruptcy is a blessing, a kind act from God in heaven above, as it would give his friends the opportunity to show the substance of their love for him, something they have had precious few opportunities to do in the past due to his prosperity and preference to giving over receiving. Of course, Timon discovers that he is far from wealthy in his friends, and that an understanding of the realities of his finances is very far from a blessing. Shakespeare shows the dangers of taking relationships for granted, for automatically assuming qualities in our friends and family that they may or may not possess. Shakespeare also shows that only ascertaining the true nature of our friends and family when we are totally dependent on them is dangerous and can result in our downfall. Two noble men, two ruined lives due to a combination of factors reacting simultaneously. First, both Lear and Timon made catastrophic misjudgments. Lear in devising the concept of dividing up his kingdom and in cutting off Cordelia, and Timon in trusting that friends would repay his boundless munificence. Both men failed to listen when told the truth about their errors, and also unleashed appalling, deeply offensive tirades which only served to quicken their downfall. I would argue that both men were unfortunate of being surrounded by particularly selfish, ruthless individuals to whom they foolishly anticipated loyalty. My next video will continue to compare the two tragic figures, and in particular their differing responses to their demises. But this has been a Schofield on Shakespeare production comparing the causes of King Lear and Timon of Athens' respective downfalls. From the beautiful island of Alderney, good morning.